While modern consoles like the PS4 may not have incredibly valuable catalogs of games, they certainly do have some high-priced outliers. The PlayStation 4 is also in a unique position as it moves out of rotation as Sony's primary console. This can be an interesting time for collectors, due to the volatility of the market during the space of the console's life. We will soon start to see some of these prices rising as copies are no longer being printed and enter people's personal collections coming off the market. A few of these games are genuinely rare and expensive, but some of the lower priced ones will likely make their way up the chart as time goes on. We're going to go ahead and leave off the elephant in the room, the Final Fantasy Pixel Remasters. Yep, it's like $700 now and you can't afford it. With that being said, it's time to explore 7 expensive PS4 JRPGs. Let's get into it. Persona 4 was released in 2008 for the PlayStation 2. It was the 5th overall installment in the Persona series. The game achieved wild popularity and across-the-board praise, seeing it re-released with an enhanced port for the PlayStation Vita in 2012. It would go on to be released on all major modern consoles and PC. The story follows our protagonist Yu as he moves from the city to a small town called Inaba. A grisly series of murders takes place, and his team of high school friends and everyone's favorite mascot Teddy must travel through their TVs to the Shadow Realm to investigate and stop the killer. Limited Run handled the release of the Persona 4 Golden physically for the modern console. As a result, there is a high demand and short supply of the game on the secondary market. People scramble whenever VGP finds a few copies and puts them up for sale. To Bring the War to the Shadows on PS4 will run you about $66, complete in box. Trails from Zero was released for the PlayStation Portable in 2010 and an enhanced port was released for the Vita in 2012. Sadly, these games were not localized in the West after Falcom requested NIS focus solely on the localization of Trails of Cold Steel at the time. This was not remedied until 2022, when the games were released in North America, Europe, and Australia for the PS4, Switch, and PC. The story follows Lloyd Vannings, a rookie police detective who is tasked with odd and minor jobs at the Crossbell branch. While investigating local organized crime groups, the cast stumbles upon a wicked cult intent on resurrecting their old god through a young girl. The game takes place shortly after the events of Trails in the Sky III. Trails from Zero has received nearly universal praise from critics, scoring between 80 and 90 on most major websites. It continues the tradition of deep, meaningful narrative, masterful storytelling and settings, and fun and engaging combat. The sprite work is beautiful, as well as the anime-style cutscenes. NIS just seems to love printing these Trails titles in limited quantities. I can remember only seeing a few copies when it first released at my local GameStop, and rarely seeing any of them again in the wild. Due to the short print run and an increasing popularity in the series, Trails from Zero will run you about $70, complete in box. Chrystar released in 2018 for the PlayStation 4 in Japan and in Europe and the West the next year. The game would later receive both a Windows port as well as one for the Switch. The game follows Rei Hatada and her sister and their adventures and dealings in Purgatory. Chrystar deals with dark, heavy subject matter and may not be for all players, especially those sensitive to mental health issues or depressing subject matter. The game was celebrated almost universally for its story and character development. The game was not, however, praised for its gameplay. The combat was often derided as repetitive, as was the stage design, with many reviewers actually pointing out the sections of later levels that were literally cut and pasted during development. Fuyuki Hayashi said he wanted to make a game that showed something beautiful could come out of something sad. It seems to be an apt description of the divisive reviews the game received. There is no smoking gun here as to why the game is quite so valuable. It just seems to have a limited physical release. Though Asian copies are affordable, the Western release will run you about $76, complete in box. The Grandia series premiered in 1997 on the Sega Saturn in Japan. The first game would later see a port in English translation to the PlayStation in 1999. The game was produced by Game Arts, well known for their hit series Lunar. Much of the staff that worked on Lunar Eternal Blue contributed to the first Grandia title. The game was universally praised and would receive a sequel, Grandia 2, in 2000 for the Dreamcast, that would go on to be ported to the PlayStation 2 and Windows. The games are both seen as masterpieces and templates for success in the JRPG genre. I have fond memories of grinding through the second game on the Dreamcast with Ryudo and Millennia. Gung Ho announced it would be remastering both games for release in a special collection to be released in 2019. The physical release was handled by none other than Limited Run Games. We all know the equation by now. LRG plus JRPG equals high prices on the secondary market. The Grandia HD collection is no exception to this rule. I have witnessed numerous surprise drops of the game on sites like VGP, when they somehow miraculously find 5 or 10 extra copies and they immediately sell out. I myself was lucky enough to grab one on the Switch the last time this occurred. To enjoy the first 2 games in the Grandia series on PS4 will currently run you about $80, complete in box. The Atellier series has long been successful in Japan, but up until recently had only achieved a modicum of success in North America. That all changed with the release of Atellier Luua series in 2019. The first game was surprisingly successful, with players falling in love with the protagonist and her band of characters. Atellier Luua 2, Lost Legends and the Secret Fairy was released in 2021 in the West and continued that newfound success. Little has changed in the way of gameplay from the first title or the prior titles in the Atellier series for that matter. Time limits are still a thing of the past. Ryza and her friends stumble across a mysterious stone, and lo and behold, they come to find out it's actually an egg. A fairy creature is born from it, and they go from ruin to ruin feeding it the mana it needs to survive. In the process, however, they unearth a mysterious temple that may portend doom for them all. Whether it was the thick thighs or her free-spirited, wild personality, players quickly took to Ryza and all of her games. Atellier games are notorious for becoming valuable after their initial release, and Ryza 2 is no different. The game also benefited from a wave of FOMO that came along with the release of its sequel and its popularity. Copies quickly dried up on the secondary market, leaving all versions with a fairly hefty price tag. To uncover the secrets of the Lost Fairy on PS4 will cost you around $90, complete in box. Atellier Luua was released in 2019 for the PS4, Switch, and Windows PC. It is the 4th installment in the Arlen saga. The game was released in celebration of the 10-year anniversary of the Arlen subseries. The game follows Luua Frixel, the adopted daughter of Ciri's darling Rorona, and her adventures in Arlen. Luua and her friends discover that the ruins that Arlen had learned all of their alchemic secrets from are failing, and their destabilization will destroy the kingdom. The game incorporated a new mechanic, the Alchemy Riddle, a book Luua was literally struck on the head by. As the story progresses, the book fills out with instructions and information. It certainly makes for a fun new meter of progression over the old time-based systems. The game was developed alongside Atellier Ryza. While Ryza was meant to give the series a new direction, Luua was intended to perfect the formula of the older games. Hence, it combines numerous aspects of alchemy, battle, and story from past games into a nice little package. The game reviewed well, with most ratings coming in around the 80% mark. Reviewers loved the blend of aspects from many games, but some did question the lack of innovation. I'm not sure if they expected the game not to stack up against the new direction of Ryza, but it does seem to have been produced in significantly less quantity than its counterpart. The FOMO hysteria for the Ryza series generated by the third game seemed to affect all Atellier games, this one especially. To become the Scion of Arlen will run you about $106, complete in box. The final game we'll be covering today is an obscure one for sure. Sword and Fairy has long been a popular series of games in China and Taiwan. Sword and Fairy 6 was set to be the first game localized to English-speaking regions. It released on Steam, Xbox One, and PlayStation 4. East Asia Soft handled the release in North America. The game was produced in minuscule quantities, and it was bad. Real bad. Critics derided everything from the dated graphics to severe FPS and optimization problems and poor translation in the tutorials. A few highlights were the overall plot and music. The problem with this title was if you were looking for action gameplay with a heavy focus on Chinese folklore, culture, and history, Zhuan Yuan Sword and Dynasty Warriors offered an experience leagues better. As poorly as the game is reviewed, it fetches astronomical prices. Sales are few and far between, but it appears to get your hands on Sword and Fairy 6 on the PS4 will run you upwards of $200, complete in box. Well, that about wraps up our list of expensive PS4 JRPGs. While some of these games are hardly above retail for complete in-box copies, I certainly expect them to rise in price as we move into the new console generations. What are some of your most valuable PS4 JRPGs? Did we miss anything? Let us know in the comments. If you like what we're doing here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We'd really appreciate it. As always, thank you for watching, and stay creepy.